Hi peeps, welcome back to my channel and to the final episode of our dark mode series. In this episode we are going to learn two things. First, how to make our app remember we are in dark mode, more even if we are closing the app, right? Let's try it here. Closing and reopening it, it still stays in dark mode, or when we are switching it off and we are in light mode, closing and opening it will remain in light mode. So this is the first thing we are going to learn, as well as abstracting away all the things like observer and how to apply dark mode to our views, view control, navigation control, tab bar controller, table cells, whatnot, into own classes, so that when we introduce new view controls, as I did here, we don't have to do that much work anymore, and we just have to implement one small function. And yes, it's a initial work we have to do with creating all these superclasses, but then afterwards, every time you introduce something new, a new navigation controller, a new table, a cell, whatnot, all you have to do is inherit from that class and it just works. So let's dive right into it by swiping to the left, and we have left off last time with the Theme Manager implementation. And what I would like to do is actually remove all the definition of dark mode for our views. For example, for the settings view, right? For example, what does the dark mode mean in regards of background color, and even settings view right here defines its navigation controllers dark mode color and the tab bar controller, which is even global. So that's not really the right place to do that. And I would also like to remove the observer. Where did we? Oh, we didn't have any observer in the settings. We had an observer in the Digitestine view controller. I would like to remove that one from here. Just remove it. And also the enable dark mode, we can command that one out. And custom cell as well, let's remove the dark mode observer here, and let's also command this one out. Now, when I would rerun the app, we shouldn't be able to switch to dark mode anymore, because nothing knows about dark mode and is not listening to it. We are light, and when we are switching it on, nothing works. Here comes the thing that we want to do. We want to introduce, for example, let's start with a cell. We want to introduce a new file and call it themed cell. So I call all the classes themed, and then cell, view controller, navigation controller, you will get it. And we want to implement basically a class called themed cell, which is a UI table view cell, right? And then we want to override the style and say init style and reuse identifier. And what we want to do for that cell is actually we want to, we also have to implement the required init. We want to make this cell to have the observer and the function that actually gets called once we are toggling on and off dark mode. So for example, we will have because it will be the observer, so we know it's a target, a selector function, so it has to be the Objective-C one. So Objective-C, and then say handle dark mode action, right? And so this class is going to listen at dark mode observer to this class and call the handle dark mode action here. So this class is aware of the dark mode. Where is it? Yeah, the handling of dark mode, and then I will call this function here. And what I want to do here is we can make this one private. So we are introducing one more function that is called handle dark mode, and it accepts actually a theme like that, and that's it, nothing more, just like that. And this function here would actually call handle dark mode and pass in the theme manager current theme. So that's all. I think that's it for themed cell. Now when we run, everything should just compile fine. We haven't used that class anywhere, but basically when this class is created, once we use it, it will have an observer and will listen to the name dark mode has changed, right? And once it hears it, it will execute that function. That function will call this function here and pass in the current theme that it will take from the theme manager, right? And so what we can do now is, for example, when we're toggling it on, we don't see any cells affected because custom cell is not inheriting from that themed cell. All we have to do here is we say we inherit from themed cell instead of UI table view cell. because themed cell is inheriting from UI table view cell. And all we want to do is we can remove all of that, and we want to say, hey, override the function handle dark mode and say text label text color is equal to theme text color, and the background color of the cell is going to be from the background color, because the themed cell is having the handle dark mode function, and it gets called by this one, right? Once toggling is on and off, toggling is happening. And in the child class, actually, we are implementing or overriding the function with our own implementation and then define, okay, what does it actually mean? And that's basically all we have to do. And when we are rerunning our app now, we are going to see that toggling on dark mode will actually toggle on the cells, and toggling it off will toggle them off as well. And this is the thing we want to be able to do for all the new classes we are implementing. For example, as you have seen, just to make our custom cell aware of dark mode, all we had to do is conform to themed cell and implement what does dark mode for this class mean. So let's just continue. One little thing is, once we turn it on, right, it's on. When we are relaunching the app, Digital Monsters is over here. It does not stay toggled on. That is because this class, right, or actually custom cell, it gets initiated once the table view is loaded, but on initiation, we're not applying the current theme, right? And we could do that also with the superclass. Inside the superclass here, we could also say, hey, this is the init function, right? On initiation, we are adding the listener to dark mode, right? So whenever dark mode is changing, we are then executing something, but we're not applying right away the, let's say, handle dark mode action. We're not executing that function. So I would add the listener here on initiation and also execute the function to apply whatever theme is currently active based on whatever is stored, right? And that means when you're first launching the app, nothing is stored. Current theme would actually return light. When it's toggled on, then current theme would return dark. And so on initiation of the cell, yes, it will be dark. And let's just rerun the app and see if that solves our issue of remembering whether or not we are in dark mode. So closing and reopening the app, it stays in dark mode. The toggle is off, but it actually is on. It's just not that we haven't, it's just that we didn't configure the toggle to be on or off based on what the current state is. So is on should be, when we are setting up the toggle, the state should be based on is dark mode. The theme manager is dark mode, assigning it to is on should make our toggle be on or off based on whether dark mode is actually on and off. So yes, it is on. Turning it off will make the cells light again. Reopening it, it stays light and also stays off. Turning it on, it is on, and also reopening it, it stays on. So this is actually the core thing we want to do during the whole episode here. So stick with me, grab a tea, grab something to snack, for example, code along, and try to get a grasp what we're doing, because this is really like taking advantage of classes and inheritance. And so the next thing we want to do is, for example, we have the table, right? These are the cells, and this is the table with the grid with the empty rows. And let's just create a new themed table, and do the same thing inside here. So class themed table is from UI table view, and init frame super init frame and style. And all we want to do inside here, once again, we will have to implement the require init, this one. We want to do basically the same thing. So we want to have a function that gets called by the observer and a function that we want to be able to override in our child class. So just like put it inside here, also put the observer and that one inside here too, right? And so there's one more thing we can do, what's also advantageous, I will get to that in a second. So we have our theme table now, right? And all we have to do now, when we rerun it, it will still compile because that code here is valid, right? And all we have to do is we go to our digidestined VC, and instead of UI table view, we are using themed table and run the app. And now you can see it's still light. Why? Because we are not having any implementation. Well, this function gets called. It does get called. Let's say print I am getting called, and we run that. You will see once we are opening the app, this gets executed from our theme table, but we don't have any implementation for dark mode in our super class. We can implement actually a default implementation for all these classes. Well, for example, for our table, we want to have the background based on the theme background, and that's our default implementation. Whenever we are conforming to that, or actually inheriting from that class, not conforming is something, I just messed it up. When you're conforming to a protocol, then you say conforming, but we are inheriting from theme table here, or not, we're actually using it right away. But if we would have a subclass, then we would inherit from it. So we are using the theme table right away with a default implementation of the handle dark mode function, which has a dark background. And what we can do is continue with the navigation and then say new file themed navigation, just like that. Whoops, I had an have missed a G, navigation, import UI kit class themed navigation. And this is a UI navigation controller, right? And this one is going to init as well from root controller, super init root controller. And then we have one required init. And then also there's another init we will have to implement. Otherwise it will complain. It's the nib name. So super init, and then with the or nib name or nil and bundle or nil, like that. And then we want to repeatedly do the same thing as we did here. Basically have these functions, and here we want to have also a default implementation for our navigation, which says navigation bar tint color is theme background color. And then we had in our settings VC, I think we had the implementation of the foreground stuff, right? We can just put it in here, which is basically navigation bar title text attributes is the foreground color is from the theme the text color, like that, the default implementation. Then we want to put in the listener and the execution of the call on initiation of that class. And let's run the app once again and see everything is still compiling and valid code, right? It is. And here's the thing, we go to app delegate, and wherever we are using UI navigation controller, instead of using that one, we will now use the themed navigation. Run it, and now you can see that's all you have to do. You have a themed navigation, it works for digidestined. Settings is still light because we haven't used the themed for settings, these navigation controllers. So the themed navigation over here as well, and it just works out of the box. And we don't have to do anything else. We're just using it and it's just working, as you can see. We haven't implemented a themed view controller yet, so our settings view is capable of dark mode, but we will get to that in a second. But as you can see already, whenever you are introducing a new view controller with a new navigation controller, all you have to do is use the themed navigation controller, and it is actually capable of turning into dark mode or light mode by just using it. Because the implementation, the default implementation already takes care of everything we want. And we are still able, if you want for example, for this navigation, for this view controller with its navigation controller, even if we would like to have, especially for that one, a slightly different appearance in dark mode, we could do a new class, for example, custom digidestined navigation controller, inherit from themed navigation, and just override this little function to implement whatever is different for dark mode or light mode, right? So let's continue with, let's say, the tab bar. So we have the tab bar as well. So this this will say themed tab bar controller. And in here, it's basically all the same over and over again and again. So it says themed tab bar controller is inheriting from UI tab bar controller, and init is super.init name or nil for bundle, and the required, come on Xcode, help me, thanks mate. And we want to do the same stuff as here. Yes, we are copying and pasting basically the architecture over and over again, and there is probably, I haven't put that much thoughts into it. There is probably a good way of putting all this implementation into a protocol maybe, and so you don't have to re-implement it, but just inherit from the whatever controller you want and then conform to protocol. But that is something we won't cover here, just because this one works super fine and doesn't require any additional adjustment later on, because I use that in my own app and I'm just super happy whenever I'm introducing new classes, whatever. It just works out of the box. So we have also here navigation. Actually, it's tab bar. We are not in navigation anymore. Tab bar, and then we have tab bar, actually bar tint color, and then theme background color. And the title, or actually the texts, are already gray, so that should just work out fine like that. And all we have to do is inside here, instead of using the UI tab bar controller, we have to use the themed tab bar controller, and it will just work out of the box. Let's see. It's dark, it's light, and also, which is super awesome, or what is super awesome, it's super encapsulated. So the tab bar controller itself handles its dark mode. The navigation controller itself handles its dark mode. So it's not like in the beginning the settings view controller is handling the navigation dark mode state, the tab bar dark mode state, its own dark mode state and whatnot. But actually everything is encapsulated and also implemented once and just works. I think I'm repeating, I'm just so amazed and I'm happy about the implementation that I'm repeatedly saying it's working out of the box and just works, but it just does. Anyway, let's do one more thing. It's the view controller. So we are saying themed controller like that, and say UI kit. Please import UI kit class themed controller is inheriting from UI view controller, right? Better spacing in here, and then super init name or nil or bundle or nil, and then basically also the required, come on, do it, thanks, and then also the whatever we've done here over and over again, putting it in here, and then the listener and the execution as well, like that. Okay, for the default implementation for the view controller, we want to have the view to be the background color regarding or accordingly to the theme's background color. And now let's run and see our code compiles, everything works. So this view is completely dark because the table view is actually the same height and width as the view from the view controller, so that's why we don't see the background color of the view controller, which will be black in this case as well, because initially when you're creating a new view controller, it's having a black background, except you're coming from storyboard, then storyboard itself is setting, I think, the view controller's view to white, but initially it's black. And here you can see, yeah, we haven't used the themed one, and what we want to do is we want to go to the settings VC. And actually, we can already delete all of that code because we just don't need it. All this toggle should do is actually enable or disable dark mode, nothing more. This settings VC is actually conforming to inheriting from themed controller, like that. We will rerun the app and we will see the first thing we want to do, because the themed controller is already taking care of dark mode. It's working. And now you can see, yeah, the default implementation is all we want to have. The background is black, but for settings VC, we have a special implementation for the dark mode because we want special labels to be white or actually handled which the default implementation cannot know about, because our view controls, they might differ depending on what we want to display, right? Sometimes we want to display tables, images, labels, whatnot. You get it. And so that's why we, in this case, we want to actually override the handle dark mode. And now we can do two things. We can either say, hey, we want to implement the whole dark mode colors ourselves and say, yeah, the view background color is from the theme, the background color. And then we know we have the detail cell label. Its text color is going to be set to the text color of the theme, and the toggle, well, it's a dark mode toggle label, dark mode label. Text color is going to be theme text color. Now this works just fine, and this is, as you can see, all we did is inheriting from theme controller and implementing that little function, and it just works. It just works. Before we had the whole implementation, right? And we had also added the observer, and I think this is way easier. And what we could have done is also, because we are saying like, well, we are overriding handle dark mode, right? But we know the superclass is actually having a default implementation. And so what we could do is say, well, let's call this the implementation of the superclass first, passing in the theme that we actually get here, and then implementing our own. And we know that the superclass is actually handling our background already. And then we want to additionally handle all the other cases for dark mode, which is our special labels here. And it will still work. So we don't have to actually re-implement the default implementation by just calling the super implementation first, right? And now let's introduce a new view controller and see where it really shines to have less work, because that was our initial work we had to do. And now it comes, it very handy that when we want to introduce a new, let's say new tab with new view controller, that we don't have to do that much work anymore. Let's close that. Theme is checked off. We don't have to care about the theme anymore. Let's say we want to introduce a new view controller, and say we say story VC, because we want to tell about the Digimon stories. And then let's say our final class story VC UI view controller. I'm on purpose using the default UI view controller here to show you how magically awesome it is to have the theme implemented. And we want to say on load view, super load view. Let's say we want to have a label just for showing off. We want to say view dot background, because background is white on default, right? That's why I want to put it to black so you can actually see it. Or actually, let's not have it black. Let's just say view.add subview label, and then let's say label translates auto resetting mask into constraints to false, and just align it center X anchor constraint to the views center X. Let's align it in the middle of the view completely, horizontally as well as vertically. Constrain it over here as well. Is active true, and label text is going to be this story of Digimon, like that. So load view is actually loaded. Okay, all good. And in app delegate, let's introduce a new story VC, right? Which is our story VC, like that. Then we want to say story VC has a navigation, whoops, the actual variable, navigation title, navigation item title is actually story, and the ANSI, story ANSI navigation controller is a UI navigation controller with the root controller story VC, right? And then we want to say story ANSI, its navigation tab bar item title is going to be story tab, like that. And now we can add it to our tab bar controllers, right? And then say story ANSI as well, story, like that. Let's run it, and we have just introduced a new tab with a new view controller with a new navigation controller, right? as you can see right here. It's having a black background because view controllers at default have black background, but let's just do one thing and, for example, say that our dark mode for the, let's say here, dark gray is our dark mode actually. Let's use that one just to show what I mean. So we have dark gray is actually our dark mode, right? Turning it on and off, that's our color. And as you can see, the view controller is not capable of handling dark mode at all. And all we have to do, like we introduce a new tab, we introduce new view control, we introduce new navigation control. Now here's the magic. All we have to do is the view controller has to conform to themed controller, like that. And the navigation control, instead of the navigation control, we are using the themed navigation. Run the app, and let's have a look. Everything just works. So you introduce something new, and all you had to do is just inherit, not conform, inherit from the superclasses, and it's all aware of it, and it's all saving as well. And then yes, if you want this one to not be black but white, then you can go into your story VC and then say, yeah, let's handle dark mode. Let's call super handle dark mode because we want to keep the default background implementation, but for our label text color, put it to the themes text color, and it just works. So I think that's super awesome. I hope this one's helping you a lot. Here's a bonus material, because you might have noticed that the tab, the status bar here is always remaining black. This one is a difficult one. It's not as comprehensive or easy to find out how to actually adjust it properly. And so we are going to do that too. And that is basically, we will have to, so how is this working? Basically, the app itself is taking from the very root controller the information about the color of the status bar. And so our root controller is actually our themed tab bar controller. And this one, we will have to say child for status bar style, right? This one has to return the view controller that is telling this controller what the status bar is, what color the status bar is. So we are going to return here our themed, just an instance of our themed controller, right? So that this tab bar controller, whenever it is accessing that variable, it gets back this theme controller, so it knows that controller actually will tell me what color the status bar is. Now, we haven't implemented anything for the theme controller yet to actually set the color of the status bar, which we are going to do now. Initially, right, when you initially launch the app, let's implement a new function, that variable that's called current, which is a UI status bar style default, right? This default is going to be light because initially, like launching the app, this was going to be light, and we want to override the preferred status bar style and return current, right? This is the first step. The second step is whenever we are applying the theme, we want to change the color of the status bar, right? So we want to actually say, hey, current be dependent on theme manager is dark mode, be either, if it's on, light content, and if it's off, default. Default will be black, not light. Sorry for that. So whenever we are applying it, please assign this one to the current. And then we are having the state, but we will have to say, hey, set needs status bar appearance update. That function should be called so that our app actually knows, hey, something has changed regarding our status bar. That's it. Now let's look. Let's have a look how it works out. We've implemented these little things, and now our status bar is white in dark mode and it's black in light mode. That is it. You've now actually learned everything I know about how to implement dark mode in an abstracted way, so it's really easy to use, reuse, and implement your custom views. And yes, if this episode or series was of any help, you can help me out by hitting like, spreading the word about the series, about my tutorials. Also check out the description box for Patreon to support me doing YouTube full time. And leave a comment if you have any feedback or thoughts or anything you might want to know additionally to what I have explained. Other than that, hit subscribe to not miss out on future episodes of new series, and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye.